Yeah, I worked with a designer on the film called The Offence. The designer's name was John Clark, and it was a very interesting production to work on, with Sean Connery, Ian Bannon being the main stars, the main actors. Um, it was quite a complicated film to work on. We had to build a large set, police station complex, which was meant to be quite a modern police station. Um, and we had one of the interview rooms had to be reinforced. We had to use breeze blocks on where the walls are instead of normal flattage, and we had to reinforce part of it with scaffolding behind the wall because of the fight sequences. Um, Sidney Lumet was a stickler for detail, and he really put the actors through their paces. And even in rehearsals, which he did for 3 weeks often before shooting started, he would get them to really fight in some scenes and not use stuntmen. Anyway, so that was one interesting aspect of building a set with real materials, solid breeze blocks. It was a very interesting film to work on, and Sidney Lumet was really good to us, and he really was a good communicator. And we built some models to start with, and he made sure that he had his camera angles planned before they went into the studio stage. Twickenham was quite an interesting studio to work in, although rather small. The stages were rather small. So for the police station complex we filled up the whole stage. In fact, the cameraman was a bit upset sometimes because although there weren't many windows, the ones that we had, that he's meant to light through, he had very little space behind to actually put his lights. But anyway, it's quite a dark film, but I really enjoyed it. And we went on locations I think we went to Reading to find the exterior police station. The other set we built at Twickenham was a flat interior that Sean Connery and Vivian Merchant were meant to be living in. There was very little shot in there, I seem to remember, or at least in the final edit, the final cut, there wasn't much of it. But no, the police station took up 2.5 stages at Twickenham, and Dennis O'Dell used to come along and worry that we were going to spend too much of the budget on a set building, but I suppose all good producers would be probably as concerned anyway. Lots of locations, basically around Reading area, including the common and the school where the young girl disappeared from outside the school. So yeah, I really enjoyed working on that, although again it's a very dark subject, because I really admired the crew. We had a very good crew, and of course the director Sidney Lumet was brilliant at communication, but he annoyed me sometimes. He would call me Chrissy and put his arm around me and ask me for advice or an opinion. But no, I think that was all meant in good humour. I think that was probably about 10 weeks shooting, because again Sidney Lumet was such a stickler for rehearsal. I think it was 9 or 10 weeks, which is quite a short period of time for a major film. And I believe it was part financed by the makers of the Bond film, or the James Bond films, because Sean Connery only agreed to do another Bond, I believe, if the Broccoli agreed to part fund the Offence. Anyway, it was a great experience for me, working with a top international director. One of the interesting experiences was working with Jerry Fisher, the lighting cameraman, who would bounce a lot of light from the ceilings down onto the main action or actors, a lot of reflective light or indirect light, which is, and kept the floor area clear of lamps and frame standards, in order for the action, because there's a lot of physical action and a lot of movement in there mainly during the interview scenes with Connery and Bannen. There is an interesting little anecdote about Sean Connery. He, after quite a hard day in the studio, he would come and unwind quite frequently in the studio bar, and you were all invited to join him, and a few of us used to join him occasionally, and he would stand a round of drinks on condition that you listened to his anecdotes, golfing stories, and there were lots of them, but after a couple of times you'd heard them before, and so it was you had to pay homage to the great man. But he was a very kind man, a genuine sort of kind man. And I think highly professional, of course. Oh, well, we went to a number of police stations in and around London. It was meant to be a very new building, and we did go and see a few. And then they were introducing basic computers, and there was a lot of high tech for the time, not compared with what's available today, in the set. So, and Sydney was insistent that we use the real thing. Any equipment that we brought in had to be genuine, authentic, not necessarily used, but it had to be there, and he wanted it for real. One of my suggestions when we were, prior to filming, was that this long corridor, one of many long corridors we built, I thought were rather sort of dreary and repetitive, so I suggested to Sidney Lumet that we have one of them being decorated. So he thought that was a good idea. So we brought in ladders and dust sheets and got a couple of extras to be painting and decorating, and added that touch of realism which Lumet was very keen on, and I was quite pleased that he took that on board as one of my ideas. I'm not quite sure how many others he took on, but he was always receptive, because he said basically if it's a good idea and I use it and people like it, he, the director, would get the credit. So he was quite keen for anyone to come up with ideas, really.